Hello! Hopefully you've met me, I'm Scott, and today, based on the fact that we had a slightly less than successful workshop the other day, I've done a quick ClipChamp tutorial, including some clips as well, at the very beginning, to show you how to set up an interview. For warning, this is a very basic video, so we're not going to be going too much into details here. I wouldn't worry too much if you're seeing and trying to apply this to what you're doing and it's not quite working. This should give you a good oversight of what to expect, but I wouldn't worry too much if not everything's going perfectly. Just go ahead, try and use this video as well as you can do, and we can work through it when we hit obstacles. Okay, so as you remember last time, I talked about organization of folders. So what you'll see here is my offline organization of folders. But you can see as I'm getting through my project at this stage, I only have footage in my rushes, one example of additional assets, and one folder containing music. I'm going to go through the rushes now and how I conducted them. The first thing to consider is your environment. So the room that we've used to conduct this very quick interview has one window with one source of natural light, and it also has a noisy fan. So the very first thing I've done is turn the fan off. It sounds like a simple thing, but my point is just be conscious of making noise. To give you an example of why lighting's important, you can see from this very first clip that I framed up that with the natural light directly behind our participant here, Jack, then you can barely see him. Lighting's a combination of making it look good as well as making it simply look legible. In this case, with no additional lights, then Jack is simply unseeable. Now I've set up this next shot. I've used a little tripod to put my camera on, which you're welcome to borrow from the media center if you're able to pick up. You can see here in the settings of my phone, I have turned on the grid function. Now the grid function is really important to help us frame up, because whilst this first clip is perfectly usable, our general aim is to get the participant's eyes on this top line here. For a conventional interview, you either want their eyes to be close to the left side of it or the right side of that middle box. So now I've tilted it slightly, you can see we've got our final interview set up. Now, the one other thing I could do in this interview, if I had the ability, is to put one more light in there. We've got our filler light and our light which is exposing Jack. However, to make it nice, it would be nice to put a light behind Jack to therefore create a little highlight on his head. I've not done this in this example, but if you have lights available, then that would be the additional light I'd use in this case. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm simply going to place my phone closer to Jack to be audio recording. Chances are, because it's a quiet room, the audio on our phone will be very clear. However, it's better to be safe than sorry, and chances are with the audio slightly close to him, it'll be slightly better. What is your name and your role at Noah's Media Centre? And could you, when you're telling me this, repeat the question at the start?
So my name is Jack Cooper.
You can see in this interview, the other thing I establish before I continue with it is for Jack to repeat the questions back to me, and then we conduct the interview. Now, the final thing to mention about this is that it's in a pretty boring room. We have white walls, Jack's wearing a white shirt. Nothing really screams nice about this shot. One of the best things you can do to make an image, to make an interview setup look good, is to add depth and to add color. And really, it's very dependent on the location you're in. You can't make everything look good, but what I'd recommend is if there's any way of making the shot look prettier by putting a plant in the background, adding some foliage, I'd recommend you do so. Now, the other footage I have got to go alongside this to create our very whistle-stop case study is other footage of Jack. That footage includes an established shot of the building we're in, a wide shot of Jack working, which is what Jack was talking about, two other shots of Jack working from either side, and finally an insert shot of Jack typing. And there we have all the clips I've got. Together they're going to edit quite well together to make a nice little sequence. Now, one of the other things you can see I've got in this folder is a folder called Music. Now, through ClipChamp, you will have music available to you. However, for different reasons, you may not want to use this. And through this project, I'm going to allow you to use my license on MusicVine. Now, MusicVine is a licensed website where you can access royalty-free music put in the background of your films. I wouldn't worry too much about the filtering system. All we're going to do is go browse, duration, and because we don't want this to be very long, you guys are going to want it to be around the 1.5 to 2.5 minutes. But for this, I actually only want 30 seconds of a clip. Now, you can see it starts to categorize these down, and you can explore through. Selecting music is really important, but for the example of this, I've got a folder full of versions of one clip, and I'm going to use that in my video. Finally, you can see I have additional assets. Now, additional assets is other things like images that you will use in your film. In this case, I simply have a PDF to show Jack's work. Obviously, this isn't exactly Jack's work, but it's an example. You'll have SE, which is sound effects. You'll have graphics, which is likely to be your logos and other graphics you may wish to put over the top of the video. Bounces, which we discussed, is effectively your exports. And finally, we have deliverables, which is where all the final assets will go. You are welcome to not follow this foldering system, but I would recommend using some kind of foldering system that makes sense to you if you plan on regularly making case study films like this. It may be fine for you not to follow a foldering system if you imagine this is going to be a one-off, but I promise it will come in very handy the later in the game you get. We're now ready to go. Some of the rushes and why I've shot it certain ways will make more sense when we get into editing, but now it's time to begin using ClipChamp. So, I've got my footage, I've got my music, and I've got my additional assets. Now, we went through setting up ClipChamp, but if you haven't done so yet, you'll be able to do so through Outlook, or if you simple Google ClipChamp, you'll be able to make an account for free. There is a premium version available, but I would not worry too much about getting it just yet. Let's use the application first and see what you think. So, as standard, if you were creating a Word document, you go into blank video. Before we get going, I'm going to quite quickly name my video project. I'm going to call it Biff Workshop Video. Now, as I went through last time, you've got my media. You can record and create, which is up to you if you wish to record straight into the software. However, it's up to you. Chances are this is going to be more of a screen recording or more of a webcam setup. In fact, creating the video I'm creating right now is very convenient in something like ClipChamp. You've also got text, music, and the stock videos that we had the pleasure of using last time. Now, before I keep going, I'm going to click on Import Media to get the stuff in. So, now I've got my folders. Personally, I'm just going to go into the list icon and rename them so I can get the 01 through 07. You may wonder why it's numbered 01 through 07, and one of the reasons is the fact that when you order the folders, then it will go in the order that you wish them to go in. So I'm going to import my rushes, my additional assets. So to do so, you'll see I've got all my clips, my audio recording I took, and I'm going to import all of them. These are uploading. Before they finished uploading, I'm going to go ahead and upload my music. You'll find in some examples of downloading music in this case, it gives you many different versions. You don't need to worry too much about what each of these do, but obviously for short videos, we're going to want short clips. And in this case, we're going to go for the shortest option, which is 30 seconds long. So these clips are uploading now. You can see as I'm setting up my project now, you can see this aspect ratio button. Now, this will be really handy if you're planning on creating content for more than just YouTube or widescreen content. I imagine you're probably going to be used to 16:9. So 16:9 is our standard aspect ratio for a movie or a film. 9:16 is, as it says on the right, good for Instagram, TikTok, and mobile videos. It is the dimensions of our phones. 1:1 is good for Instagram. It is the aspect ratio of photos that most people upload to Instagram. And 4:5 is a similar form. This is the type of thing you'd usually see on Facebook. 2.3 is fairly new to me, to be honest, but it is apparently for Pinterest and Facebook. And finally, we've got 21.9. So 21.9 is our cinematic view. What it's doing is replicating a lens that people use in proper films, in Hollywood movies and such. And that's what 21.9 is for. But as it says here, you can also use it for blog banners as well, if you're going to put a clip there. But for the purpose of this, we're going to stick to 16.9. My interview has finished. So I'm going to go through my interview. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this down. To make edits, you can see you've got two options. If you look here on the left, I can click and drag to cut down a clip. And I can do that on either side. The other thing I can do is go to this little scissor icon here and quite simply cut it in two. You can see now this clip is cut in two. If I was to select that one, press backspace or delete, then I would delete it. There may be times that you're left with a series of clips that you've cut and you want to get rid of the spaces in between them because you want this to be one neat edit. ClipChamp nicely makes a delete this gap icon in those gaps, so now you have one neat edit coming together. Finally, I'm going to recommend that the first thing you do when you import clips is you right click on them, you go up to audio and you go detach. The reason for this is I think it's helpful for you to treat your video and audio separately. As we talked briefly in the last one, you have also things called J and L cuts, particularly when we're working with B-roll footage. And you won't be able to do them without the ability to manipulate audio separate to your video. The other thing it's really handy for is when you're editing interviews, you may not actually be particularly interested in the video itself. You know that it's not going to change much. So maybe you can go to this section here, make this much larger, and then you've got a nice clearer image of the waveform. Now the waveform in an interview is quite helpful because what it will do is it will show you when Jack's talking and perhaps when the interviewer is talking. So I've now edited down my interview. Very simple process. My interview is about 30 seconds long and all I asked Jack was who he is and what he was last doing at work. Obviously for your case study videos, you're going to be working with a lot more content. However, for the purpose of this is a nice simple start.
So my name is Jack Cooper and my role at Novice Media Centre is a project coordinator for young people and music.
So now I've got these in two different sections. I want to get a rough idea of what my timeline's going to look like. So I know, first things first, Jack is going to introduce himself.
So my name is Jack Cooper and my role at Novice Media Centre is a project coordinator for young people and music.
And then I'm going to have a little gap. And then I'm going to have Jack say his next line.
The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the summer programme next week that we're running.
So now what I was hoping to go through in the workshop and get to this point is now we have interviews edited down. I wish to put the music in. And we're going to be creative in doing so. So I'm going to click and drag my music in. I know this is the title of my song, so I'm going to click and drag this in. Now, the music is likely to be the very start of your video, unless you have some type of clip which is introducing it before the start of your before the music comes in. For the sake of this, music is going to be the first thing we hear. What I'm firstly going to do is I'm going to listen to my timeline with the music on it and see when a good moment in the first 10-15 seconds would be for Jack to introduce himself. Okay, so what I would like as a creative here is after Jack's finished introducing himself, I'd like the drop of the song to come in. So what that means is I would like Jack to finish introducing himself and then for it to go. So let's give that a go. I now know this clip is Jack introducing himself. So I'm going to drag that and using the waveforms down here. introduced Jack there. Now we can now see the music is starting after Jack. Let's see if this creates a problem.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Novel Centre is project.
So first things first, the music is far too loud. So what we're going to do is we're going to select it and go to the audio on the far right and turn the volume down to just 20%.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Novel Media Centre is project coordinator for young people.
So it's still probably a bit too loud. So we're going to take it down to 10%. Okay, I'm liking it. But it does come in too hard. So we're going to add a fade right at the start. If you go down underneath audio, you go to fade. And I'm going to change the fade in to about 1 second long. So now if we play it.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Novel Media Centre is project coordinator for young people.
Cool. That's pretty good. I'm liking it. The next thing we want to do is we're going to find a place for the next clip to come in. It makes sense for it to be that next cool little drop, okay? So I'm going to click and drag Jack's clip to this bit.
The last piece of work I did on my laptop was...
Or a bit earlier.
The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the summer program next week.
One of the limitations of ClipChamp is the fact that we can't turn the audio up. During the clip, okay? It's not ideal, but we'll make it work. So basically, if you can ever hear the music too loud over the narration, over the person talking, then you're either going to need to turn up the volume of the person talking or the music down. So we're going to turn Jack's up to about 110 as well. We don't want to push this too far, but 10% should be fine. Now I have the bass of my film.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Novel Media Centre is project coordinator for young people. The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the summer program next week.
So I still think the music is probably a bit too loud, so I'm going to take it down to 6% to be safe. Okie doke. So I know Jack working is what he talks about in the second clip. So this is when I'm going to create my sequence. So I'm going to quickly build up, I'm going to build up my shots going from outside the building right up close to Jack working. So now you can see this little sequence I've created. So before we keep going, I don't really need any of this audio. This is all just background audio of Jack working. And it's not going to make too much difference because I really want to hear Jack talk. So I'm going to go through and mute and press the sound button on each of these clips. Now I did talk about separating the audio out. It's up to you whether you do this because you can separate the audio out and then manually delete it. But it may be okay when you're using B-roll to simply mute each of these clips. Now I have another clip of Jack, so I'm going to add this to the end. I've created this sequence now that goes from Jack's second clip to the end of my video.
The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the song program next week.
Okay, great. Now I've got one major problem with my thing. I've got a bit of a gap here. I don't have enough footage. Now, in this case, I simply don't have enough footage because it's a very specific thing that's out of context. And usually you'd have a shot of Jack's at events. You'd have other footage that you could use that applies to your organisation. However, for this, I simply don't have the footage. But you may find yourself in a situation like this. We talked before about the possibility of using stock video, which you have available to you through ClipChamp or through Adobe Stock. However, it's probably not the best use because it's not going to look the same as the footage. It's not going to be shot on the same camera. It's just likely to be inconsistent and look like stock footage. So I'm going to make changes to my video. I'm going to drag Jack's clip up so that it matches the audio pretty much exactly. I do lose the effect that I initially got, but let's see how it edits together.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Knowledge Media Centre is project coordinator for young people. The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the song program next week.
So the video is okay. It doesn't quite work that well at the start, and one of the few reasons I can see for that is the fact we don't quite have the footage. The media center clip or our wide comes in at slightly unnatural time. So what I'm going to do first and foremost, I'm going to bring it Jack's clip slightly before the music, so we can have a little more on the media center clip because I think it's quite good to set up the shot.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Knowledge Media Centre is project coordinator for young people. The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the song program next week.
You can see I can put that, I put the cut on the drop of the music so it feels a little neater. Okay, so now we have our 30-second clip. Okay, so now what we've created is the very basics of a film. Obviously it's going to be different from what everyone's doing. And one of the main differences is going to be in emotion. This is a very basic example of what we're trying to do here. And your projects are going to involve longer interviews. They're going to have more meaning within them and a lot more emotion. Some people aren't even going to have people talking to the camera. It's going to be text. But the principles still apply in terms of starting with your A-roll or your interview, or what the content you wish to get across as the main layer before you start building on top of it. You are welcome to not add music. The reason I add music early on is because it helps create structure to the video and make it seem well, maybe not make it seem, but for it to be well edited, because you can edit to the music from the first stage. The problem we can create if we're creating an interview, or we're editing down an interview, or we're adding text in, and then we add music in later, is it won't quite fit, and it will just end up being something quiet at the background. We want to use all elements together. So there are two main things left to do in this clip, but the things that we're not going to talk about today are sound effects and graphics. They're things we're going to talk about at a later date, mostly because from the free version, the graphics we use, we won't be able to use in ClipChamp, because you'll want your own fonts that apply to your organization, and it's going to be easier if we do that another way. The other thing we can do, as you can see on the right here, is add captions. But these are somewhat troublesome in ClipChamp. They're not consistent, so we're actually going to do them in a different place. However, before we go any further, the one thing we're going to do is we're going to change the colour and improve the image ever so slightly. You can see this is a perfectly fine looking image. We've talked before about the way you can improve it with colour. However, we can make some subtle improvements to our video. So what I'm firstly going to do is I'm going to click on Jack's video, or Jack's interview, and I'm going to go down to adjust colours on the right. In general, the best rule I can give you is you can play around with these four things here, but go from top to bottom. And our general rule of thumb is we start with exposure. Exposure is light. It's how bright an image is. You'll see if I turn the exposure up to the top, the image is incredibly bright, and if it's all the way down to the bottom, it's incredibly dark. Our subject here, Jack, is our point of focus. We want to, if we're going to adjust exposure, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure Jack is exposed. In this case, Jack is exposed. You can see him very clearly. So we're not going to make any adjustments to that. Next, we go down to contrast. Contrast is the difference between the dark and the light images in your image. So if we turn it all the way to the top, you can see there's a lot more contrast. And if you go down to the bottom, it's a very flat image. We're going to improve this ever so slightly. And the reason for that is because it's quite a flat image in general. So we're just going to try and add a bit more depth by adding a bit more contrast. The next thing we can do is adjust the saturation. This is how much colour comes through your imagery. But this is not too colourful an image in general. So we're going to play around with it in a little bit. We obviously don't want it to be too desaturated, otherwise it's going to look like a memory. And too high is just going to look unnatural. So, in fact, we'll leave it roughly as it is. Now, the one thing that may be helpful here is temperature. Temperature is our colour temperature. You can see here, because it's a bright day, there's a bit of yellow to the image. We actually want to make this seem a bit more natural, so we're going to turn our temperature to the bluer section. It's only a minor adjustment, but I believe that looks ever so slightly more natural.
It's Jack Cooper, and my role.
And on reflection now, I think we can turn the exposure down. Now, what you can do is you're welcome to go through and edit all of your clips. In this case, the only one I remember being quite in need of editing is this one, because the light is coming from the other side of Jack. So therefore, Jack isn't too well exposed. Now, we don't want to destroy the image, so we're going to go to adjust colours whilst on Jack's on this shot, and we're going to turn the exposure up. Now, you can see doing this simply makes it the exposure unlegible. Jack is unsavable at this point. The problem we're going to have when using a phone is that the difference between the darks and the lights in the image is a lot smaller. So you cannot save the information because Jack wasn't lit here, we've lost all of the information in his face. And so to try and brighten him up to get him to the point that you can see him is simply going to make all the lights in the image incredibly bright and off-putting. So is there any saving this image? Not really, if I'm being completely honest. We have one more thing to do in ClipChamp and then we are done. We're going to export our video. You can see there's a nice, helpful export button at the top. But before we do that, you're likely to be doing what I've done, which is starting the clip in the middle of the timeline. This far left point is what we want to get to. The delete function, however, I talked about before, applies to all the large sections. So if we simply click delete this gap, we can go right down to the beginning of the video. Now you can see just above our timeline we have a thing saying 0.0.0.0.0. That is where our cursor is on the timeline, and it goes through to 30 seconds and 44. That's where the clip ends. If we were to add more things way down the timeline, you can see that would mean that the video currently would just go through all this black section and then play that final clip. So if you do have things that you're keeping on the timeline, you'll want to make sure they're gone for when you export, or you'll end up with a video that goes on far too long. So we're going to undo that, and that will be the length of our clip. Let's export it out. So ClipChamp doesn't give us 4K without premium, but that is fine for what we wish to do. I'm not going to save this in the cloud. I'm going to export. I'm not going to save this in the cloud. I'm going to export it, and this is going to take it to downloads. Now my file is ready. I'm going to click save to my computer, and I'm going to save it in the bounces section of my folder. Now let's have a look to see what it looks like.
So my name is Jack Cooper, and my role at Knowledge Media Centre is a project coordinator for young people in the UK. The last piece of work I did on my laptop was writing out a list of resources that I needed for the summer programme next week.
So there we go. We've not covered captions, and we've not covered graphics in this. We're going to be doing them a separate time. The reason for that is that you're welcome to click captions in ClipChamp and give it a go, but I imagine for everyone it's not going to be completely consistent, and it depends on the length of the video. Some of you may not be working with speech-to-text captions. So hopefully this video has been useful, and I look forward to talking to you soon.